Hello, welcome to the Roundhouse podcast with Paul Solentrop of Wichita State University Strategic Communications. Thanks very much for listening. Today, our guest is Sean Johnson. Sean is the Assistant General Manager of the Minnesota Twins. He was promoted to that position in January. Sean started with the Twins in 2002 as an area scout, and previously, he was Vice President of Amateur Scouting, where he led the club's work in the Major League Baseball draft. Sean played catcher at Wichita State from 1996 to 98. He is a graduate of Wichita South High School. You probably know Alex Johnson. He is Sean's younger brother. Alex is Associate Athletic Director for Development and Revenue Generation at Wichita State. Kara Johnson, his sister, is the Executive Director of Donor Experience at the WSU Foundation and Alumni Engagement. So we've got a lot of Shocker connections in the Johnson family and a lot of impressive titles. They just go on and on and on. Sean, let's start. Assistant GM for a Major League Baseball team. Describe your duties.
Yeah, so this is my 24th year with the club, and I've always been in the scouting department, amateur side, with the draft every year. And so with that title, I'm still overseeing and leading our department on the amateur scouting space. And also we'll branch into other areas of the baseball operations, which is a lot of things depending on what time of the year it is on the baseball calendar. So I'm excited to venture out into new parts of the operation. And I've been living here in Minnesota this is my 9th year here. And so I've been able to be in the office around how things go and to see how trades are, how they form and how they don't form most of the time. And, discussing free agency and all the other things that go on. There's so many layers to what make a baseball operations department run. And so I'm blessed and fortunate to still be here.
Pro sports often very transitory. Why have you spent 24 years with the Minnesota Twins?
Well, I mean, I feel like I'm lucky. I know most people in baseball don't get to stay with the same organization their whole career, and hopefully that's the case with me. I'd love to be here till the day I retire, which seems hopefully is a long time from now. But I've had a few chances to maybe leave the organization, but I've always just really loved working for this organization from the day I started. Around a lot of tremendous people who have poured into me, and I'm at that time in my career now where I'm trying to pay that forward. And whether it's hiring a new area scout who's just starting, really investing in that scout, and other people that are working here on this floor of the stadium. So kind of coming full circle again. I'm lucky I'm still here, and I hope I'm here for a long time.
Okay, that's interesting. Hiring scouts. I think there's probably a lot of baseball guys who think that would be a good way to make a living. What are you looking for when you hire a scout? How do you kind of tease out that this person would be the right person to get out there and evaluate for us?
Yeah, I think most people think it's a good idea on the surface and something they want to do. It is a tough job as far as just you're gone, you're away from home a lot. You leaving your friends and your family behind quite a bit. But I think when we're looking to hire a new scout, I think we've always been led by two things. That's passion and curiosity. You've got to really love the game, love the aspects of it, and going out to the ballpark and trying to figure out the players, what kind of, and but I think that's what's kept me in the game for so long is just curiosity. I want to be a learner my whole career, and whether that's reading books or listening to podcasts or talking to other people about how they do the job, how can we be the best in the game? That's what pushes me out the door every day. And, I'm just excited to pull into the target field, every single day. There hasn't been a day where I'm like, I don't know if I want to come to work today. I can't wait to get to work and roll up my sleeves every day. So I think that's what we're looking for. Some teams, prefer scouts with some experience, and we prefer them to have not much, so we can really invest in them from the beginning and set the foundation of their scouting acumen and go from there. So that's kind of the way we do it. Not every team is the same.
I'm glad you mentioned books. I'll ask you for a book recommendation later. Okay, take us back to the halls of South High in 1995. You were walking around probably in your South High Titans leather jacket. At that point, were you planning on a career in baseball?
I think when I was in high school, obviously I wanted to play in college, and I started off. I spent 2 years at Newman. I was a pre-med major. That was my goal. One of my best friends is Brad Dart, who's one of the best orthopedic surgeons in the state now. So we joke all the time. I watch baseball, and he puts people's bodies back together for a living. So our paths broke apart pretty quick after I got to Newman, and then I had the chance to come to Wichita State. Coach Kemnitz had recruited me out of high school, and I had a chance to transfer over, and it was the right time. We went to the World Series my first year. I thought, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. So I really treasure my time at Wichita State, and going into that, I think looking back, like I wanted to be a coach. I wanted to kind of follow in Gene and Brent and Jim Thomas's footsteps, and I really got a lot of reward out of seeing people get better and improve at something. And so I think I was on a coaching track. I wasn't sure exactly what, probably baseball, but I ended up getting the director of operations job that opened up when Scott Smith left the program, and that was one of the best days of my life. Being able to come to a baseball office every day and work with legendary coaches and awesome players really, really opened my eyes to that. And so I knew I wanted to be in baseball once I got into that role. And then the scouting thing, I've told this story many times, but some people are dying to get into scouting and in baseball. And I got lucky because David Chad, fellow Wichitan, who was the scouting director for the Marlins at the time before he went on to do way bigger things than that, offered me a job. And I remember my first territory was a massive area looking back. It was Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, Kansas, Colorado, the Dakotas, Nebraska, which would have been a really tough area to cover. And then 3 months into the job, we all got let go by the Marlins. And then the Montreal Expos, which no longer exists, that tells you how old I am. They brought all their personnel into Florida when they were still the Florida Marlins. And then long story short, I got lucky and ended up with the Twins, had to move to Arizona, lived in Phoenix for 15 years as a scout for the Twins. And that's kind of been my path.
You mentioned being curious. Is that the root of why you love the scouting, the evaluating aspect of it? Is you're always trying to find people?
Yeah, it hasn't gotten much easier, the art of scouting in the last almost quarter of a century that I've been doing it. It's always a challenge. You never have 2 days that are the same. There's no two players that are exactly the same. They're all different puzzles you need to try to figure out, and that's the draw. The downside is we're never going to master this. Teams, scouts, they make mistakes a lot. They're wrong on players a lot, but they're also right a lot. And that's what keeps you going and moving you forward. When you see a player that's 17 years old that you invest in and see them come up and produce for the major league club is a very gratifying feeling. And that's why we all love it.
What's changed the most about your job since 2002 and how you evaluate a prospect?
I think easily the answer is technology. When I started, the biggest thing you could do as an area scout was write a beautiful report about what the player looked like and the tools, and you had to submit this eloquent report. And now we don't talk near as much about what the body looks like because we have tons of video of every player, and this is exactly what they look like. And we have ball tracking information from TrackMan and Hawkeye and all these other, technologies that have come onto the scene from the major leagues down. So we have more tools to layer into our evaluations. Our scouts go out and still the foundation is go pick out the players you like. And then we layer on metrics and analytics, all the things you hear on the back end of that process. And then, so our draft room looks a lot different. When I started, there were 6 to 8 people in a draft room, and now we have 45 people in our room. We have player development. We have an R&D department. We have IT developers that are building these beautiful screens that we can watch, video on and run the draft. So it's really evolved. Running a draft room is different now because you have to include a lot more voices to the equation. And that's what I love about the job is leading that room, the draft room, that week of prep for the draft and the 2 or 3 days that the draft goes down. it's our Super Bowl, it's our Christmas, and that's what we live for, and that's really exciting. And I'm already looking forward to it. And it's still 7 months away.
We hear quite often stories about a coach or a scout liked the way or didn't like the way a player interacted with his teammates or didn't like the way he behaved in the dugout, those kind of more anecdotal things. How do you go about balancing those eye test kind of things, personality kind of things, makeup kind of things with what you're talking about, the video, analytics, statistics? What's the balance there?
Yeah, so we usually talent is king. You still have to start with a talented player. And then once you go see a player perform, there's a lot more layers to get through. We on the high school players especially because they are just a riskier demographic. There's a lot more that can go wrong. They can get hurt. Their bodies can change. Their mentality on life can change. So it's a lot more risk with those players. And we get usually a year to get to know those high school players before they end up either getting drafted or going off to college. So we want to get to know the person. We want to know why they play the game. What's their motive? Is it because their parents made them play their whole life? Do they just generally love the sport? Do they love to compete? And I think if you boil it down to one thing, it's competitiveness because, and I go back to, I still use all my Wichita State teammates that I played with that went on to the big leagues to this day because those guys all had a lot of similar DNA. The way they love to compete, how much they could slow the game down when the lights got big. Those guys I look back with, teammates from Wichita State, they all could do that and they all had good work ethic and they wanted to be a big leaguer. And so you have to connect a lot of dots. So our area scouts do a lot of that background work, getting to know the player. What kind of teammate is he? Is he going to, ruin a clubhouse? Is he going to elevate a clubhouse when he gets to the big leagues? What kind of person is he going to be in our community when he gets to Minnesota? Those are all things that we take a peek at before we select a player.
So to remind people, running through some of your teammates would have been Zach Sorensen played in the big leagues, Kevin Hooper played in the big leagues, guys like Pat Magnus, Jeff Ryan would have been on those teams. Just to remind people who you were surrounded with. Who's the player that you've drafted, evaluated that you're happiest to be right about as a talent evaluator?
No, that's a great question. The easy answer is probably a first rounder, so I'll start with that. I would say Royce Lewis. That was my first draft as the director, so I was probably slightly scared to death of what was going to happen. And you feel there's a lot of pressure when you pick that high in the draft, and you're trying to draft the best player in the continent. So trying to get that right is a big deal. And to see Royce go from this, he wasn't the most polished first pick of all time. He was just a really good athlete who knew how to play the game with tremendous makeup and attitude. And so we banked on that out of the group we had to select from. We just believed in the person and who he was. And his swing changed quite a bit from when he was 15 all the way to now he's 24 or 5 years old now. So player development is another big piece of how scouts look right or quote wrong on a player. But our player development's really good. It's come a long way since I started here. It's very progressive and they think outside the box and they're very collaborative. And that's a huge piece to why scouts look good is if our player development is synced up with that group, you can do a lot of good things. So Royce has gone from this raw piece of clay almost to, to see him hit home runs in the playoffs that lifted us to the second round and we beat Toronto are moments that I'll never forget. Because you go back to that first time you saw the player and then the next time, and he just kept getting better and better as we watched him. And then to see him do it in a big moment in the big leagues in a playoff game was an awesome feeling.
Wichita is home to the Wind Surge, Minnesota's Double-A club. I'm sure rosters are still taking shape, but can you give fans some prospects to look out for that they might see for parts or all of the summer in Wichita?
Yeah, I think the headliner is Walker Jenkins, who got there at the end of the year last year. One of the best young men I've ever scouted. Just an unbelievable kid. All the things we just talked about, he checks every box. He is very driven. He is super talented. He's a hard worker. Hopefully he's not there all summer, but I would get out to see him, when the season begins because he's a spectacular player. with a really high ceiling. We think, the ceiling's really high for him. He's going to be an impact big leaguer. He had a little bit of a lower body injury last year to start the year, and he still made it to Double-A at 19, which is really, really hard to do. So that's the guy I would circle on the roster when you go to that game.
Let me give you a little information about Walker. So he's a left-handed hitter. He was your first round pick in 2023. Grew up in Wilmington, North Carolina, and I think he played about six games here. So he was here at the very end of the summer, as you said. Okay, so this is the part then where I will kind of shamelessly beg for some Twins fans to listen. How about a name that maybe a big Twins fan should be thinking about as we're getting ready for spring training here? Who might be a surprise or who might come out of nowhere?
I think, most of our team is back. And we haven't done a lot to change the roster this off season. So I think you're just looking for young guys to take another step forward. And that's, we're obviously start with Carlos Correa and Byron Buxton being healthy. That really drives our team. And then, Brooks Lee, who got to the big leagues last year, another one of our first round picks from a couple of years back, take the next step forward. We've got more pitching coming on the way. Zebby Matthews, who came up, he's already been through Wichita, but guys like that, David Festa. We have some good young arms coming to fill out the back end of our rotation. So, Pablo Lopez, opening day starter, he's tremendous. But those guys with Joe Ryan being healthy again, Bailey Ober, those are the guys that are going to hopefully lead us to the playoffs again.
Brooks Lee spent some time in Wichita. Am I remembering that correctly?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So you started with the Twins in 2002. In that time, 14 winning seasons, 10 playoff spots, 9 division titles. Why have the Twins had that kind of consistent success?
I think we've done a pretty good job of, we're not a high payroll team, but we've had pretty good production through our system. We need to have, internal homegrown players to be successful. So I think we've just had good leaders since I started here. Terry Ryan was our GM when I started, who's in about every Hall of Fame you can be in, executive of the year twice, which is really hard to do. So guys like that, Terry Ryan, on to Derek Falvey, Bill Smith along the way, like really, really good baseball people. And then there's a slew of people that are not at the top of the chain here that are just really, really good, smart baseball people. So I think we've been steady, since I've got here. It's just that kind of organization. And I think it's, you're always one decision away from throwing the team in the trash. So, but I think we've made really good decisions and some bad ones too, but every team does that. But we've had really good guidance. I think that's the key.
So the draft is July 13, 14, part of All-Star Weekend. The Twins pick 16th. Give us the big deadlines. What's your calendar look like from now until you're on the clock?
Yeah, so there's games starting to out in California. You can go see a high school player tonight if you want to. They start early there, and it depends on what part of the country you're in. The Northeast and the northern part of the United States, the players are still inside getting ready to go, and we're going to start popping out to some preseason scrimmages for the college teams. The Division I weekend is Valentine's Day weekend. And then once the bell rings, we'll just be going, and we kind of weave in high school games middle of the week. A lot of college games on the weekend is kind of how the calendar goes, and we'll be full blast on the road till the end of May. And then with the draft being in the middle of July at the All-Star break, we have a little more time on the back end. There's the draft combine, where we get another chance to connect with players, and then we'll prep for the draft, the second week of July. And then the signing deadline's around August 1st. And then in the middle of that, we'll start watching next year's, the 2026 group, in June, July, August, which isn't ideal, but that's kind of the calendar there. And then once the fall hits, we're back out watching the colleges. The high school showcase and circuits have kind of died down. And then it's just getting back onto college campuses and watching the guys for next year. So it just repeats after that.
So if you have a list of, let's just say, 10 guys who we think we would like to get and could get at 16, when is that list solid?
Yeah, so every year it depends, if you're picking first or fifth or eighth or in the back end of the first round, it kind of guides your scheduling. You want to keep, so for pick 16, we want to have a pool of much more than that, 20, 25. And there'll be 5 to 10 that kind of separate themselves from making into our pick. And then the rest of those guys where it's remotely close, will still pay attention and go see those players and then kind of whittle it down. You don't want to, narrow your focus too early. You kind of want to let the season play out because some of those guys that aren't supposed to get to us at 16, a couple of those guys will slide. Then there'll be another player who's we didn't think was a first round pick going into the year who will play themselves into our mix. So you've got to stay nimble. You've got to stay, easy. You have to adapt to what's happening around you in the environment in college baseball and how the high school players are going and injuries happen. Pitchers go down in the spring. So it changes your approach. So you just have to stay nimble till the very end.
Nimble was exactly the word I was going to use. Yeah, that at 16, it seems like you'd have a lot of scenarios. Okay, the draft, 20 rounds, and then you've got compensation picks and whatever that may add a person or two. Is there a kind of a general philosophy on what rounds or where you say this guy feels like a sure thing versus this guy, he's an upside play? Do you go into it thinking about players in those terms?
Yeah, we rarely use the term sure thing because they all have some risk to them, as we've come to learn. Nothing's foolproof in scouting, and it's so the very best players you see the players that go in the first round are the surest bets most of the time. They have the best tools, they have a clear profile defensively for a position player. Those are the kind of things that get a player into the first round. And then once you get past the first round, the players have more and more flaws as you get to round 2 and 5 and 10. Lesser tools, more risk. Maybe if it's a pitcher, they throw lesser strikes and they may have more reliever risk. So the players, you have to just kind of stick to what you want to bring into your system. And so we're still looking for players that don't strike out a lot and pitchers that throw a lot of strikes to boil it really down to small terms. You have to you have to stay disciplined. I guess that's the right answer. What to be you just want to take the best player you can when it's your turn to pick. And not every team sees players the same. The first 30 to 45 players in every draft, most teams have in the first round. But then once you get past that number, we'll take a player in the second round that another team might have in the sixth round. And some other team will take a player in the second round that we barely like. So it's kind of like Baskin Robbins, there's 31 flavors and everyone has it as a favorite flavor and we just have to stick to the one we like.
Is there a player that pops into your mind if I were to say who's a guy who kind of went against a lot of your tendencies or your instincts, but boy, he really worked out well?
I think the most famous player that we took that we like that most of the industry did not like was Ryan Jeffers, who's a catcher on our big league team now. We took him in the second round, and there were teams that didn't have him. Their scouts did not have him turned in to be drafted. And a lot of teams had him as like a day 3 pick. So most of the times from other teams saying, "Hey, great pick. We like the guy." We were crickets. Like no one texted us. No one said anything. And you can pull it up on YouTube somewhere. The broadcast of that draft, Jonathan Mayo and Jim Callis, they had nothing to say about the player because they weren't prepared. They didn't know who the guy was. So it wasn't a great feeling. I'll just say that on the front end. But then he went on to, I think, led the minor leagues in OPS his first summer and then got to the big league. So it was incredible. But at the moment, it felt like we took the worst player on the planet.
What was it about Ryan Jeffers that you guys saw?
Well, I think most people thought he wasn't going to be able to catch, but he went to UNC Wilmington. He actually works out with Walker Jenkins in the winter. But he put up good numbers at UNC Wilmington. Our area, it's the value of a good area scout who liked him, believed in him, got extra looks on the player. So we just kept going and we kept liking him, at the top of the draft. And meanwhile, the industry is not even working the guy. So it's the power of having good people on your staff with talent who know how to evaluate and they know how to communicate, which seems very simple, but It's not always the case, but it was a good process for us because we stuck to what we believed in. We didn't go with, well, this player's not even ranked on some other, third party list. We believed in the player because our scouts did, and we made the pick.
It seems like an old school Brent Kemnitz story from 1986 when, at a American Legion game in Oklahoma and nobody else was there. That's funny. That's a good story. Okay, you mentioned books earlier. Give the people a book recommendation.
Boy, I think we actually just brought this. We have a winter book club that we do with our staff every year. Um, and we brought back Blink for our younger scouts who don't have much experience. But I think that's a great book to read as far as understanding like the art of thin slicing and thick slicing and your first impressions when you see something and how to trust that and when to poke holes in that first impression. I think that's a great foundational book that I really enjoy. So I would start there if you're. And then another good scouting book is Dollar Sign on the Muscle. It's super old school, but I love the old school part of the book. That's a great book for people who are curious at all about scouting. It's got a lot of great quotes from some old time scouts who I didn't even know. So it's a great read too.
So Blink and Dollar Sign on the Muscle. Those are two Sean Johnson recommendations for a good book. Okay, you are known as an excellent chef. I wrote a story about you way back in 2016 and mentioned pan roasted chicken with bacon, mustard, vinaigrette, carrot cake pancakes drizzled with maple cream cheese, and German apple pancakes on Christmas morning for the Johnson family. What's your latest creation in the kitchen?
Boy, I'm not making near as extravagant dishes anymore because I have a 4 and a 1 year old now, and they most days they don't like what I put on the plate. So I kind of keep it super simple, making a lot of spaghetti, a lot of pasta, a lot of mac and cheese. But I guess the only update I have there is I really enjoy smoking meat on the Traeger. I don't have many hobbies anymore. I kind of work, spouse, parent, and I cook. That's about all I have time for anymore. So, yeah, I do enjoy an overnight, pulled pork process. That's kind of fun for me.
That's good stuff. Kids are going to listen to this and say, "Let's go, Dad. We deserve some of that German apple pancakes." Okay, I asked your brother Alex for a question or a story, the one he came up with. You are the oldest of six. He told the story about you organizing room cleaning, house cleaning, using music, and then judging who cleaned up the best. He wasn't sure if you actually did any work or if you just kind of sat there and watched. So you were competing, you were evaluating, you were motivating. Were you just preparing to be a GM even way back then?
Yeah. So the backstory there is we would try to get the house. I'm the oldest by 7 years from all those other kids. So um, they would destroy the house and my parents would be gone. So I knew they're coming back at a certain time and I tried to clean the house by the time they got home. So we would start the first round of these. Okay, I assigned each of my siblings a room to clean and they would clean it. And little did they know, every time at the end of the first round, I declared it a tie. And so we had to do one more round. And then I would announce a winner. But by the time we got to that point, the whole house was clean and I just supervised. So probably because I got tired of cleaning the house all the time. Oldest problems.
Very savvy. Those oldest kids, they know how to do those kind of things. Growing up in a big family, how'd that shape your life?
Um, I think it teaches you to share. You don't get your way all the time, and maybe to be resilient there. But um, yeah, we had a lot of love and in our house, and I think my parents taught me to be hopefully thoughtful and caring and respectful. And I mean, my sister and my brother who is still there at the Wichita State, doing great things. Um, then my other sister and my brother Ryan's a scout for the Tigers, and we all turned out pretty good, which is hard to do when you have that many kids. So I'm thankful for that.
Let's say Wichita State brings you back to talk to the current baseball team. What's your advice on getting the most out of college and then building for a pro career if they're that talented or if that's what they want to do?
Yeah, I think It's a great question. I think it's about maximizing who you are and taking advantage of all the resources you have. Because you're not going to have them after you get off that campus. Because when you turn pro, it's really about your career and who you are and how you. I mean, you have teammates in the minor leagues, and getting to the big leagues is a different journey. But I think if you asked any of the players from Wichita State that got to the big leagues, obviously, like, some of them won World Series, Braden Looper and guys like that. But they'd go back and we still talk all the time. My group that I played with there, it was the best time of our life. Because you never have that camaraderie again in your life. So don't ignore the opportunity you have. Make the best of it. Don't skate through workouts or in the weight room. Just give it the very best you can. And because otherwise I think you look back with regrets.
Yes, Braden Looper and Casey Blake. Those would have been two names that I neglected. They would have been on that 96 College World Series team. Okay, Sean Johnson. He is newly promoted assistant general manager of the Minnesota Twins, former catcher for Wichita State, South High graduate. Sean, thank you very much for your time.
Always a pleasure, Paul. Thanks so much for having me.
Great insight as always. Thanks for listening to the Roundhouse podcast, courtesy of Wichita State University Strategic Communications. We encourage you to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can always find more Roundhouse content at GoShockers.com.
Down to a 3-2 pitch with 2 men on, 2 outs in the ninth. The stretch by Tyler Green. Here it comes. Struck him out! A no-hitter for Tyler Green! A strike 3 call on the outside corner, and Tyler Green has pitched the 4th no-hitter in Wichita State history, the 2nd in as many years, as he joins fellow classmate Charlie Gendrome as the author of a Wichita State no-hitter, and in the process struck out a career-high 13, including all 3 outs in the 9th inning. Tyler Green completes a no-hitter, and Wichita State defeats New Mexico 12-0.